My name is Pearl Osa. I am a 43 to soon to be 44-year-old mom of 11 biological children. So I guess it's a no-brainer for me that I will homeschool my children. The economics just do not make sense to put my children in a mainstream school. But before I had 11 children, it was not the economics that made the decision. So it was in 2014, and at that time I had 5, I think. And when you have so many children, you tend to lose track of time, you lose track of names. So forgive me for not being exact with the data, but I know that in 2014 I had 4 children in mainstream school. I had gone at the end of a particular year, it was December, I think it was 2013 December. I had gone to fetch the children from school and was having a conversation with the teacher. And the conversation was a Christian school, using the accelerated Christian education curriculum, which I continue to use in bits and pieces today. And this conversation left a bit to be desired for me. It was one of those where I knew I was going to have sleepless nights and say, is this who is teaching my children every day? And I'm not one of those people who go to a restaurant and the service is bad and then I complain and I want to see the manager. I don't do drama. I get up, I leave, and you never see me again. And so it was the same with the school. I got up, I left. I decided as I walked out of there that I've got about 3-4 weeks to the next term and I'm not coming back. So I call another friend of mine who was busier, I think, at the time than I was. She's a minister, a pastor. She was in law school. She ran a business and she had 5 children. And I asked her, I understand you're homeschooling, how does it work? And she's like a breeze. It has its downtimes. It is difficult sometimes, but it's working. And I think that's what I needed to hear. I needed someone to tell me that I was able and capable, if I had brought these children into the world, to have an understanding of what would suit them best academically. And so on the back of that, with no clue, no curriculum, no background, I decided we're not going back. I wrote to the school and I was like, it's been wonderful, but thank you, bye-bye. And so in the new year, we sit down together and try and figure this thing out. Luckily, they had been on the ACE curriculum, and the ACE curriculum serves both in a school setting and a homeschool setting. So it was really just a smooth continuation. My 3-year-old at the time was, just starting creche, so to speak. And I noticed that he was somewhat gifted, and so I had the opportunity to fast track him, if you would. Now, when you have 11 children, guys, you will find that you have to bend to each personality. And each one has a different mode of learning, and each one has a different calling. And so all of my training has yielded to the specific calling, the speed, the passions, the strengths. I have children that are not academically as gifted and might be more athletically gifted. And so you're not going to put the same pressure on one as the other. My first, who had been in the mainstream school, and I took him out he was starting grade 4 with me, just entered second year varsity now. He's 17, pre-med. And I look at little things like that and I realize the school system will not have enabled this. All of my children learned to read at the age of 5, but this first one I'm talking about learned to read at 7 because that's what the school system creates. My why was because I had these 11 lives. These 11, at the time, not 11, whatever number it was then, I had these investments. Each child we have is a nation, not an individual. They're a whole nation, constituency waiting to happen. They're a package of greatness. And I'd be damned if someone else defines the limits of that greatness for my child. Or if they box them into one specific category and say, this is how we do it, and so this is how it's going to be done for you, even though everything in the child screams against the norm. Most importantly, I was not going to have anyone else dictate to my family what our set of values were. So for us, it's Christian values, and it was going to be by the scripture. And the Bible tells me that our children will be taught of the Lord. And so I had to test that out. And believe you me, it worked. People then say 11, that's a lot. I was calculating the other day just how much it is on diapers, on food. It's interesting economics, I tell you. In my house, we buy a 12.5 kg bag of milli meal. 5 of those. And those last us a few months. Bread is bought 30 loaves every fortnight. So these are just some of the economics, right? But I think education does not have to be expensive. It has to be tailored. And what really, the cost that you have to consider is your time and your sacrifice. So the next question I know I was asked to touch upon was, how do you make it happen? How do you manage your time? Here's a very simple formula. I tithe 10% of my time at the beginning of the day. Now, I understand I might not be talking in general to everyone with the same faith structures I am. So if you don't, an explanation of the tithe is that it's 10% of whatever it is you've received. Whatever form of income, you give it back as a seed to the one whom you believe gave it to you. Most times that's money. But can I challenge you to think of time as the greatest resource, because with time we make money. Now you've got 24 hours in a day. Imagine tithing 2.5 of that right at the beginning. What the tithe does is that it sanctifies the 90%. It sends the 90% off on an errand that accelerates what it is capable of doing. Let me put it this way. If I had $100, let's just say you and I'll make you the believer and I'm not the believer, okay? So you've got $100, I've got $100. I do not tithe my 10% of that, so I budgeted this 100 rands as to everything I need to do. I promise you at some point I will fall short. You, on the other hand, have got your 10%, you've done the right thing according to your value and faith with it, and the remaining 90%, I'm looking at you and wondering, you must be a fool. How is that going to stretch in this economy? No way. But I tell you, what happens is that 90% is sanctified. What happens with the 90% is that it receives an anointing to do more than even the 100% can do. That's what happens with the remaining 90% of my day. It is sanctified, it is redeemed, and God is sitting in heaven thinking, she's put us on the spot here now, eh? Because she's got only, what is 90% of, I teach math every day, I should know, but 90% of 24 hours will be about 21.5, yeah? So she's got only 20 hours and there's 8 of those that she must sleep, and she's standing here in front of these people boasting about what I'm able to do. I better show up. And he shows up. It's been a principle I've used in work. It's a principle I've used. I worked in one of the big 4. I headed up learning and development nationally across the nation. And I would get in the office and start with prayer meetings. And I was, they just looked at me like, this is one of those Bazwalani, This is one of those Christians, a lot of prayer, a lot of talk, no action. But in 6 months, my boss had to come to me and say, like, there's something here. Because in 6 months, problems I inherited in 6 years had been solved that no one else could solve. I had less time. What had I done? Sanctified the 90%. And so it's a long route to come back here and tell you that I manage my time by sanctifying the 90%, number 1. Number 2, by not in any way thinking that I'm some kind of superhero. If I've got all 11 of these individuals, for Pete's sake, I've got an economy. They must get involved. So we get involved. Everyone knows how to cook and clean. And I don't care what society calls that. It's how we grew up. So it's not spoiling children. I only got a nanny this year, after 5 years. And of course, it was tough to break the mold of everyone knowing what they know how to do and push her aside and be like, no, we've got this. And one day she says, I want to make this pup. I need to make this pup. Please let me make this pup, because my son, who was making it on his day, because they have a roaster, had made it with a formula that I had got a nanny to teach him 5 years prior. I've got 10 minutes to go. Yeah, 5 years prior. So he's 17 now, he had learned at 12, and he's still using a 12-year-old recipe. And she was just like, please. So I said, by all means, please make it. But as you make it, teach him to make it, teach them all to make it. So the first 5 have kitchen duty once a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That has freed my hands to have no guilt in doing what I need to do. Did it happen overnight? No. There were many years literally pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen trying to repeat to someone how you get it in the no, you don't use the mop, no, you use the cloth, no, you get on the floor, no, you don't try and cheat me because my eyes see everywhere. What did that mean? It meant that someone who had traversed the corporate had to put her life on hold because these nations were more important. I came to a place where I was enabled, and not everyone is, but I am grateful for that privilege. I was enabled to stop in my life building bricks for Pharaoh. Did that mean that we had surplus? No. It meant we had to learn to be good stewards of what we had. It meant that I had to relearn and unlearn a certain lifestyle and the flashy cars that I had driven and, even change location. But there's just that sense of there's a future behind this, there's a reason behind this. And when your child gets admitted to pre-med at age 16, it's not a pat on the back, it's like it makes sense now. It makes sense now. So I want to tell you whatever sacrifice you're going to have to make, and you're going to have to make sacrifices. They are all very well worth it. They will come back and they will pay big time. How have I managed this financially? Well, in the beginning, I used the one child, got all the curricula he needed, and I start to use them on the others. So I have not bought new. I've got 11 babies. We don't compare. If this is your first one, or you've got 2, or you've got 3, I understand that the math might be different, but I'm telling you how it worked for me. I scout the internet for free curricula all the time. Right now, I'm using something called Easy Peasy. Anyone heard about that? Easy Peasy, free. So much free stuff. More importantly, I develop my curriculum on a daily basis. Literally, I'd be with a child and I'd be like, what does he need to know now? What does he need to do now? In order to do that, he needs to learn this. Where is a resource that can help me teach this? I don't see it. Maybe I do. Maybe the way that right now in the heat of this conversation, here is an example that will make sense for him. And so all curricula go out the window. And his specific interest at that point will dictate how that particular piece of information is taught. Does it mean that I need to sacrifice time? Yes, it does. Does it mean that I need to be very well planned with my time? Yes, it does. So we will be up 5:30, we'll do chores. School will start roughly at about 7:30. The older ones pretty much control their own schedule at this point because I graduate people away from needing me that much. And I think that's been the strength, is not create a dependency. Because they're not mine to start with, and they're not going to be here forever. I'm stewards, and I'm a steward of them as my wards, and it's so important, the back of my mind, to keep saying, the owner's going to come back, and he's going to ask me, what have you done with what I gave you? He said pretty much to occupy till he comes. Those of you with my faith will understand the scripture that I just dropped. Occupy till I come. And so there's an occupation of many areas. I leave you now, I'm going to a friend's fashion launch, and then from there I'm going to another launch. And I was a Mrs. South Africa finalist 2 years ago, and all the journalists asked me, with 11 children, at the time it was 10, so I had the 11th baby while in the pageant, and continued to climb through the pageant. That was just God, guys, that's another story. So the question would always be, well, how do you, and I say to them, you don't know the time when I put my life on hold. To be a mother, to be a parent, and to be a teacher are 3, I think, of the greatest privileges that I will not exchange for any lifestyle whatsoever. Life is in seasons. There's a season you must plant yourself, and there's a season you must blossom. And when it was time to plant myself, go into obscurity and be known by no one, that was the season. It was almost a decade. It was fine. Today, there's a fruit to you. So when people look at me, they're just like, how do you do all that? Because they're trying to do it all today. I did it over a decade. So find your now where are you now? And understand that you have been sent to do all things. You can do all things. I've seen that, thank you. But not necessarily all at the same time. So at that time in my life, it was about raising my children. I was clear on what the sacrifices were. I've got the older ones now. And there's this myth with all of the big family shows you've seen that the older ones are always co-parents. Not always true. My older one told me straight up, I'm no one's tutor. Yes, I'm excellent in science, but I will not be, no matter how much I've tried to ask him, he's just like, it's not happening. So if I've needed help, I've recruited help. There are times where we were stuck with something, and if I had to get a tutor for that something, then I would. But overall, I would tell you that in the first year alone, my costs of education went down to about 25% of the other costs. What did I get rid of? It was uniforms. It was trips. I mean, we get in a trip in the car, we go where we're going, we have a sandwich and a pack of chips. Hello. Not the whole thing that the school would ask for. I didn't need the trips, I didn't need the uniforms, I didn't need the curricula, I didn't need to buy the textbooks. I wasn't ashamed to ask family friends whose kids had graduated, or they don't want to be called kids, by the way, they say it's baby goats, whose children had graduated for their books. It's doable. It requires humility, it requires very strong planning, and it requires tithing the first portion of your day. And watch what God will do with the rest, because after all, they are His children. That's it from me. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.